Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Hey guys, before we jump back into the podcast, I want to say thank you for listening. But I noticed that you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet. Go to Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube or just scan the QR code in the corner where you'll be able to find multiple podcasts that we have with over 300 episodes that's uploaded right now for your enjoyment. So do that really quickly. Now, get back to the podcast. All right. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Earnest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. Therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, please listen, like, subscribe, and share our podcast on all of your podcast listening platforms. And also make sure you guys go and check us out on our YouTube channel, which is the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network, where you will find the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, which is a podcast that I've been doing with other girl dads like myself. And also you will find the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast that you're listening to right now. So make sure you guys go there. Again, that's the Deal to Heal. That's the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network on YouTube in order to check out those two podcasts. And also there's some other podcasts there as well. And we're looking forward to bringing you guys even more podcasts on the network. So again, that's the Deal to Heal with E. James Podcasting Network. Make sure you guys go and check that out. But today, just like any other day, we are blessed with the guest, Mr. Jay Hall. How you doing?
I'm good, Ernest. How are you?
I am well. First
Awesome.
of all, I want to say thank you for being here, because you could have been anywhere else doing anything else, but you're here with me and my listeners, and we definitely appreciate it. And so, Jay, we're going to jump right into this thing. Do me a favor. Introduce yourself to my audience. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
So my name is Jay Hall. The most important stuff about me, I am husband of one wife. I am the father of four incredible adult children, two of whom are married, and have also given me then about 4 grandkids. My daughter-in-law is pregnant, and we'll have grandkid number 3 coming in December, we think. Vocationally, I am an educator. I am the Dean of Social Sciences at Oklahoma City Community College in Oklahoma City. I've been there for about 3.5 years, where I get to take care of about 9,000 to 10,000 students a semester, helping shepherd them through their academic journey. And the rest of my time is spent doing things like this. I'm a podcaster. I have a podcast that I talk to authors and other bookish folks connected to the state of Oklahoma, where I live. And I'm also an author. You can see underneath me there, my first book was called God Help Me, I'm a Young Dad. I think that's what we're going to talk a lot about. I've also got a book for college students called College Unpacked, and am working on a novel that will be out here one of these days. So excited to be here and ready for the conversation.
All right. I love it. And we're definitely going to have a great conversation, because fatherhood is one of the things I love to talk about, right? Definitely being a girl dad myself, being a stepdad, fatherhood has played a big role in my family, in my life, should I say, definitely in my family, being raised in a 2-parent household with my mom and my dad. And, I noticed at an early age that, everyone wasn't blessed with that opportunity to have both parents in the home. And so definitely blessed by God to even pay attention at such a young age that I was. And I knew that I wanted to be someone who was active, in the lives of other children who didn't have their father in their lives, and I didn't even have a word for it then. I learned later on in life that there was a mentor. Like, oh, okay, that's what it is. And so, so one of the things that I do now, I am a member of an organization called Champs Male Mentoring, and here in the Chicagoland area, I think we have 3 or 4 locations around the
Cool.
country. But the original and main location is in Chicago, where I am. So yeah, so we're gonna have a great conversation. So before we even get into what the things that you do, Jay, let's go back to your own upbringing and your experience as a child and your experience with your father. How was that experience growing up that helped you to become the man that you are now, or vice versa? I don't know, because we're just talking for the first time. But what was that example or non-example, if that's the case, that kind of pivoted you into becoming, or into even having the idea to write the book about being a young dad?
So the last chapter in the book is about my dad. I grew up with 2 parents. My stepdad came into my life when I was 3, so I don't remember anybody else but him. He's my dad. He taught me to ride a bike and throw a baseball and drive a car and all the things that dads do. We had a decent relationship. I think, there was that stretch when I was a teenager when you
Yeah,
start we all have that. I think mine was a little bit exacerbated by the stepdad thing, but
yeah,
not too much. We got along pretty well. But the last chapter of my book is about presence, and it's about dad showing up. And I always talk about my dad and he's still with us, so I don't want to make this sound past
hmm,
tense.
right,
But I talk about my dad. I was a musician. I was in band and choir and musicals and all those kinds of things. And my dad could not have understood those any less than he did. But took time off, got away from work, was always there, didn't know what was going on probably half the time or more. You know, he could appreciate some things more than others, but choir concerts were okay. Band concerts made no sense because there were no words. There was nothing really to follow. It was just listening to the song for a long time, but he was there. And I didn't
right,
recognize that for the gift that it was when I was 15, 16. I mean, I think as I got a little bit older, I realized the sacrifice he was making to show up and to sit
yeah,
through it. But I think that formed a lot of who I chose to be and still choose to be, even though my kids are adults now, as a dad, in terms of being present, showing up, making sure that I am active and involved in their lives, even when I don't necessarily know or
mhm,
understand what's going on.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you talk about
cool,
being a girl dad. My 2 daughters. So my boys were easy. I can coach basketball and baseball and football and those kind of things. My daughters, one was a gymnast and one was a swimmer. I knew nothing about either one of those things, but I
right.
just showed up and yelled when it felt like it was time to yell.
Right, right. I love it. I love it. Definitely would love to have you on the Girl Dad podcast as well,
Yeah,
because
let's
that's
do
a
it.
whole nother conversation that we can have. But I definitely, one thing I connect with you on is the stepdad thing, because I
Yeah,
I was the stepdad, so I have 4 stepsons. Who's all my kids are adults now. My daughter is the youngest of the 5, and she's 23 now. But I had 4 stepsons, when me and their mom was still married, and 10 years, I think 10 years, I was their stepdad, and still is. We have a great
sure.
relationship. Even me and their mom are still the best of friends. But I definitely understand. We've said, you get them teenage years. I knew early, like, all right, just coming in, like, sooner or later we're going to get to the "you're not my dad"
Right,
phase of life, right?
right.
That's just part of being a stepdad. But it was 2 things that, and I always share this, 2 things when I came into my son's life, and came into their life is kind of a stretch, should I say, because I was always around. Because me and their mom grew up together. We've been friends since we were in kindergarten, right? And so our moms were great friends. We went to church together. We grew up together. So I always was around them, even
Right.
though I was, what I mean, me and their mom wasn't together, but I always was around. Actually, when their mom had her oldest son. So she got married. We weren't married together. She was married to somebody else. I ended up marrying somebody else out of that. But when she had her first son, which became our son, my mother became his godmother. That's
Oh
how
wow.
close our families were, right? It wasn't until years later, I think, when me and his mom got married, I think he was maybe 8 or 9, and so. But one of the things that when I came in, that I thought was important, that I set all four of the boys down, and I was like, listen, these two things I want you to remember, because I knew that the you're not my dad and all that stuff was coming. In the beginning, it's all fun and games and everything, and they were still young too. But I was like, just remember these two things: that I love you and I have your best interest at heart.
Hmm.
And no matter what we go through, right now, they were still young, or like, but you're gonna get older. You know what I mean? And things is gonna get rough. There's gonna be some things you don't like about me, and some things I may tell you to do that you don't like, whatever. But I always remember that I love you and I have your best interest at heart.
Hmm.
And if you can remember those things, it'll get us through the hard times. And then definitely those times came when some of
Right.
them had the "you're not my dad" and the whole thing, and just being teenagers. But I always like to share that out of my four sons, the one that gave me the hardest time, is the one that says "I love you" the most now, as a young man. And
Yeah.
so, to all the stepdads and step parents, just hang in there.
That's
What I
it.
mean? It gets better.
That's it. Keep showing up.
So, Jay, I want to go. So you mentioned about the book, right? And you mentioned about the chapter on your dad. So, and also you being a girl dad and a father yourself. So, what even made you write the book? Were you a young dad and then decided to write the book, or what was kind of the backstory that made you say, okay, I'm gonna sit down and write this?
It came about when my son told me that he was going to have a child. So
Okay.
when he and his wife let us know that our first grandson was coming, I had this. You have these thoughts. I mean, after you get over this is the coolest thing ever.
Mm,
I wanted my son to be a good dad, and
mm,
you go through that conversation of, did he learn enough from me to be the dad that my grandson needs him to be? And felt pretty confident in that, but I thought, it never hurts to remind. And so we are
right.
a family that writes things. We write letters, things like that. So it started as a series of letters to him about, here are some things that are just important, right? Being loving, being thankful, serving, showing up. And as I'm going through that process, I started thinking about a lot of his friends that basically grew up in our house who were also beginning to have kids. The
Mm,
One of the trainers at the gym had just had a son, and a guy at my church had just had a son. And I thought, you know what? There are all of these young men who are kind of going through this thing, and the stuff that I want to tell my son is not specific to him. These are
right.
things that are true for all of us.
Yeah.
So it's already written down. I might as well stick it in the book form and put it out in the world. And the goal was to get it out before my grandson was born, and then he showed up 2.5 weeks early. So I didn't quite beat him to the punch, but that's when we put it out.
That's great. That's great. So how old was your son?
Oh, you make me do math. He was 25, 26.
Okay.
One of those two.
Yeah, yeah. So I would have loved to be able to have that story. My I have two granddaughters now, by my two oldest sons. But the second oldest was a senior in high school. I think it's senior or junior in high school, and was like, we got a knock on the door one morning, and
Mm.
the young lady's her stepdad. Actually, he's her stepdad, but he's a police officer. And so we
Wow.
got, we were familiar with the family and everything, but we got the knock on the door one morning. And I opened the door, like, okay, why is the police at my house? And he was like, well, we got something to talk about. And I'm like, all right, what's going on? And so me and my wife, and he came in, and his wife and his daughter, and it was like, I'm sure he didn't tell you guys, but we about to be grandparents, and so that's how we found out.
Oh, wow.
So I would have loved to have it been, married and all of that stuff, but that wasn't our story. It was
Sure.
with our second granddaughter, but yeah. So the first one wasn't necessarily that way, but nevertheless, definitely love being a granddad.
Oh yeah.
Definitely love my granddaughters. So I want to go back a little bit because you mentioned about, it's the whole book situation starting off as a bunch of letters, and I definitely love that. And I'll share a story why I think letters are important a little later. But you shared start off with these letters that you were writing to your son, and definitely noticing that even some of the other young fathers that was or kids that were starting to have kids. And I think I had my daughter when I think she was 25. I think I was 25 when she was born. I may have been 24. She's 23 now. I'm 50. What was that, 24, 23? I don't know, around there.
There's math
No, I
involved.
was 20 something. Yeah, you're right. And so just if you can think about it, just a couple of the letters a couple of the topics that you thought was important for him to know that you end up putting in the book. What were maybe like one or three of those topics that was like, all right, I think you need to know
Sure.
this.
Well, I think that, and this, I don't remember like which letters came first, but as I think about kind of just the general premise of what I wanted him to know and understand, it came from, I'm a former pastor. I do life from a faith
Mhm.
perspective, and it came from Second Peter, where the Bible says that God gives us everything we need for life and godliness. And
Mhm.
I believe with all my heart that that includes fatherhood. It's not just being a missionary or preaching or doing whatever, but it is the stuff that we do from day to day. And so all of the book is centered around this idea of there is a source of the things that we need to be a good dad, to be the dad that our kids need. And that's not necessarily inside of us, that we don't have to stir it up. And so when I think about some of the other things that are important in the book, I think the next chapter is about being loving, right? And there are days, I don't know about you, but there are days where I don't feel like loving much anybody, but I have the ability to tap into the love of God that I can then express whether I feel like it or not, right? And so it's that kind of thing. It's how do we step into this river that's kind of just flowing along with us all the time, that has everything that we need to be the not perfect dad, because our kids have a perfect father. It's not us. That's actually good news.
Mhm.
We get to just tap into that and in a lot of ways right along with it, but to be intentional about seeking God's love so that we can feel it for ourselves, but also then impart it to our kids. And one of the things that was really important to me as I was putting the book together was helping dads understand that we need to have these things in us, but
Mhm.
it's also part of our responsibility as fathers to help impart them into our kids. So the
Right,
book's
right.
designed to be really, really practical. When we talk the chapter on service, we talk a lot about that we need to be serving our family and others around us, whatever, but we also need to be taking our kids with us when we do it, so that they begin
Yeah.
to see what service looks like, even young. How can they serve around the house? We do this really cool thing at our church where about once I don't know, every couple of months, we'll just take all the families to the gym, and there will be food boxes that need to be packed, or necessity bags we pack for homeless
Mhm.
people. And I love watching families talk to their kids about this is why we do this. So it's that whole Seth Godin idea of people like us do things like this, and we do these things because of who God's made us to be. But it's one thing to say it to our kids, and we should say it. It's a whole other for them to watch us go to lunch late once every couple of months after church so that we can do something to help somebody else.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that, and definitely that's been a great part of my life. I know I shared with you that I was executive pastor, but even before that, I was born into a family of pastors and preachers and ministers, right?
Yeah.
And so just growing up in the church and in the family of church and believers, that was one of the things that was very I mean, we didn't even have a choice when I was growing up, right?
Right.
It was like we went to nursing homes, we went to hospitals, we went to wherever people were,
Mm.
and we would have service and all of that. And so we were born into a lifestyle of service, like
Yeah.
you're going to serve, regardless. And I think that it's so big, and even one of the things that we did with our kids was actually by the time our kids was up and moving, we had our own nonprofits and things that we were involved with,
That's
as
cool.
adults. And so, feeding the homeless and gathering clothing and things of that nature to be able to take to them, or for people to come to the church. And we had this, in our basement, like these racks of coats or whatever, like,
Yep.
whatever you need, just come get it. And so we were very raised, first of all, raised to serve, but then also felt it was important to put that mindset and that heart into our children as well, to be able to serve people. And I think that's like one of the biggest gifts that God gives us, and the biggest missions that God gives us, and even the example that Christ set is to be helpers one to another. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like to really look after one another. Um, and so I think that's important. I want to go back to one of the things that you said at the very beginning when we talked about knowing that God gives you everything you need to be the father of your family that you need. And when you said that, I was you know, thinking about my son, who, again, was still in high school when he became a father, or just grad. I think he had just grad. Nope, it was before he graduated. So it probably was his junior year. I think she was born during his senior year. But just thinking about, the things and the conversations we had about not being prepared for the
Right.
responsibility that now you're finna have to step into, and having that conversation. But I think it is important that, like you said, if you come from it from that standpoint, that no, you probably are too young. You know what I mean? And I'm sure it wasn't planned, but God planned it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so now you're taking on this responsibility that you're about to go on, and maybe I don't think that you're ready, but yet there is a part of the fact that God gave you this responsibility. So there is a part, either He believes you are ready, or He's already made provisions for you to
Mm.
get whatever the things that you need in order to be ready to be a responsible dad. And I think, if I look at it even that way, me being a part of his life and me being a part may have been a part of that
Oh
preparation
yeah.
that I didn't even know. What I mean? And so just your thoughts even on that, because I just, that was my first thought as you were saying that, just like, yeah, because my son wasn't ready. You know what I mean?
Well, but the reality is, are any of us ready? I mean, I remember the
Oh,
night my son was born, and my wife had a very difficult time. We almost lost her. We almost lost him in that whole
mm,
process. So they wheel him in at about 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm dead tired because we've been up all day. My wife is still drugged and asleep. And they hand me this little 9-pound human and say, okay, here you go. And I
yeah.
changed exactly one diaper in my life prior to that. I had no idea what I was doing. So even at 20, I think I was 25, I didn't know what I was doing then either. But one of the things I tell dads as I'm interacting with them in lots of different, speaking and different conversations, there is such a there's such a challenge to younger men, especially, to feel inadequate, that
Mhm.
whole thing of I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know how to do this, can lead us to, so I shouldn't be. And what I always want to encourage dads is understanding that God knew what He was doing when He put your family together.
Yeah.
So when your family looked the way it did with 4 stepsons and a daughter, that's not by accident. You're the right guy for that, right? In those moments, your son is the right guy for his child, even at 17, 18 years old. And that doesn't mean we're perfect, but
Right.
there is something about who we are, who God's making us to be, that is the right thing for who God is making them to be. And it's so easy to think, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. I don't go to the gym every day, or I don't, I can't teach them how to play football because I didn't play, whatever it is
Mhm.
that make us, because we compare, right? We look at social
Right.
media, we look at other families, we think, well, we're not like that, so I must be screwing something up. And it's always possible that we are messing some things up, but that inadequacy and that comparison, it's such a just a punk thing in our lives, because we're not mistakes. Our families aren't mistakes. Our kids aren't mistakes. And we are intended to be together on purpose. And you talk about living out your purpose and fulfilling your purpose. Part of that purpose for young dads is to be that dad. There's not so I think if I wanted to say just this deal of inadequacy and I can't and I don't know how or I shouldn't or whatever, it's not there, right? God doesn't make mistakes. He didn't screw up, even if it was unexpected, even if it was unplanned, even if it's a surprise, or a situation like yours where I had this life and now I have this life, and this life comes with 4 additional children. So here we go. That's a beautiful thing, right? And that's an intentional thing. So we get to just embrace it and move forward in it, knowing that it's not an accident.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and I want to even speak to what you said about the inadequacy or feeling inadequate, right? So one of the things that actually, and what I wanted to the whole story, because I know my podcast listeners have heard it before, but the way that I got into podcasting is during my divorce from my son's mother. Um, During our divorce, one of the things that I realized was that every woman I've ever dated throughout my whole life was a fatherless daughter, right? And so that sent me down this path of, well, how can I help this demographic of women that I keep coming in contact with? So I started a page on Instagram called Friends to Fatherless Daughters, just talking about, fatherlessness and so forth and so on. Long story short, I'm here now, right?
Yeah.
we're here on this podcast. But one of the things that I talked about, even with the fatherless daughters, and even being a mentor myself, and talk to young boys who don't always have their fathers active in their lives, and even some adult men who are adults now but made it to adulthood without a father figure, right? And I always say, if you don't have it and you want to be the best father you can be, there are resources there for you to have. You just have to be intentional, and we'll talk more about intentionality, but you have to be intentional about finding that resource. Finding the dad groups. Finding other dads to hang with. Finding the men ministry at church to be able to talk about some of the things that you're dealing with, or even some of the inadequacies that you may be dealing with that has nothing to do with fatherhood. It's just maybe some things just on manhood in particular that you're dealing with. But the point is, if you want to be a great father and you didn't have your father in your life, there's ways to get that information that you missed. There's ways to learn it. There's ways to impart some of the, information, finding the books, in the spaces to be able to, like, all right, I didn't have the best example. Well, let me find the examples, either around me, or let me find some of the examples that other people talk about, that they've started programs about, that they've written books about, to get that information. Because I always say that our minds is like a computer, right? And it can do amazing things, but it can only act on the information that it has.
Right.
So if you don't put the information in it, it can't act on that information. So if you grew up without a father or without a father figure and you don't know what that looks like, well, when you try to reenact that, your mind is going to be like, all right, where are we getting this experience from? Where are we getting this information from? To draw off of. Because I remember one guy that I knew, that his father actually passed away when he was really young. So he grew up without his father because his father passed away. But one of the things he would always say is, when I have kids, I will always be, present in the lives of my kids. And then he had kids and he wasn't. And I've said, well, it's one thing to say it, because he used to say it all the time, like growing up before he had kids. I said, but you don't have the experience. You didn't have a father figure, And so in your heart, I think you really did want to show up as a great dad. But when you were placed in that real life situation with no experience and nothing go off of, you know what I mean? It's like, what do?
You don't
And
have that model.
That's where that information and those other men and those, resources that you have to actually physically go find the information to become the man that you want to be. And I think that is so important for us.
Well, and I think that then speaks to people who are a little further along, like you and I are, to be that guy, right? To be that person in that space, to answer questions, or to just be available or to be a shoulder or a listening ear or whatever when that young dad comes and says, I don't know what to do with this. Even if it's like, my kid hadn't slept in 2 days and neither have I, and I don't know what to do. Right. I mean, just even the basic things like that all the way through. My kid's a teenager and I'm not even sure they're human anymore. Like all that kind of stuff also goes on. But I think so there's a call for those of us who are a little further along, but there's also for younger dads or whatever age really, when you see those kids in your world who don't have that person and are actively seeking a father figure of some kind. I mean, I spent most of my ministry life actually working with students, which meant that I worked with teenagers who many of whom didn't have a dad in their life. And I would never presume to take that role. But at the same time, they just needed an adult male that they could talk to and say, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know. I mean, even like, I don't know how to go buy a car. I don't know how to get a credit. I mean, just those little things to have somebody in their life. And those of us who should for our kids and for those around us.
Yeah, and I think I definitely agree with you, and that's one of the reasons why I'm a mentor today is for that reason, you know. And I share this story because you mentioned about the kids growing up. I shared this story, and I've shared it on the podcast before. But when I was really young, I think I was a teenager at this time, right? And so growing up in Chicago, you know, one of the things, and I'm sure it's everywhere, but one of the things that we like to do when we hung out with our friends, you know, we like to crack jokes on each other and just, bag on each other, whatever. And this one day it was my brother and, one of our friends that was kind of going back and forth. And so my friend went on this tangent, cracking jokes about my dad. And he just going on because my dad was a mechanic, so he was always oily. He didn't care, he was like oily clothes and stuff and all those different things. So he was going on this tangent, just talking about my dad. And so my brother wasn't saying anything, and he was just cracking joke after joke, and he's going on for a while. And then when he stopped, my brother just looked at him. My brother said, "You know what's funny? You can tell me everything about my dad, but I can't tell you anything about yours." And as a teenager, we was like, "Oh,
right."
But I never forgot that,
Yeah.
And I think, especially because, and I always talk about when we talk about purpose and things of that nature, I always say purpose leaves clues, right? And I think that already having God put it on my heart at a young age to even be a mentor when I didn't even know what that was, and then to have this situation as a teenager to happen, and then fast forward, into my adulthood, I remember those memories so vivid, you know what I mean, that it didn't even let me forget that, hey, this is part of what you said you wanted, and this is part of why you do what you do, and I think that is so important, like you said, for us who are, more experienced, should I say, as fathers, and even just as father figures, because again, my friends, my dad was around, and my dad wasn't even actively trying to be that. You know what I mean? Like he was just being my dad, but my friends were around, and so they got to see how he interacted with us. And then of course, if they were around, he was, tell them or whatever, whatever situation it was.
Right.
But he wasn't trying to be a mentor or whatever. He just doing his thing. But it's just how important it just brings back the fact of how important fathers are, and even in your presence, just your presence and being around, and just not even just fathers, but men in general, especially in the lives of kids and young boys, and definitely as being a mentor now, how I see it. Just your presence of being around and being active to be able to be, even as yourself, to talking to students or whoever in whatever capacity that they come to you as being pastors and then, they're your church members, whatever the capacity that they come to you, but just being a man and being active in their life to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that way, or maybe you should, take this road, or, just how you doing today, whatever those little things. A man's presence has so much power, and a lot of times we don't recognize it. We definitely don't get honored for it too often. but I think our presence just by itself, especially as being fathers and father figures. I love to say father figures because again,
Yeah,
I'm a stepdad. You know what I
me.
mean? And so
Yep.
even before, and I would say like my kids, when me and my wife was married, we were married 10 years. I don't remember one year that we lived when we were married and living together that we didn't have somebody staying with us,
Mm.
right? We always had one of our kids friends or friends with an S, friend or friends that stayed with us at least for a certain amount of time, because before me and my wife got married, her and her husband had been divorced and separated, so she was operating as a single mom, and so her whole circle was other single moms. And so
Oh yeah.
when I got married, to her, all of the other single moms were still around, and their friends were still around. So a lot of times we end up taking in some of the other boys for a while, and to help that mom out, and to just being that home, that safe haven,
Yeah.
for the boys. And again, so I just think that our presence as men, as father figures, and as fathers ourselves is just so important in the lives of the not just our children, but all the children that's in our vicinity.
That's actually the last three words of the book are keep showing up. It's this
Mhm.
idea that, and I recognize that I lived a very privileged existence when my kids. I worked in jobs where I could leave in the middle of the day and go watch a baseball game or drive a couple hours to a swim meet and nobody batted an eye. And so I'm always careful when I say, show up as much as you can, understanding that as much as you can doesn't mean the same thing for everybody.
Right.
That there are situations their dads are incarcerated, dads are separated because of deployment or marital situations or whatever, but there are still ways to be present in the life of those kids. It's just a matter of being intentional and being sometimes creative about what that can look like. Even
Mhm.
I had a couple of different times where I had an opportunity to travel with the college where I worked and was gone for 3 weeks and left letters for my kids to open while I was gone because we didn't have phone contact. I was,
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere, but was able to still have that point of connection. So they couldn't see me, they couldn't hear my voice, but they could see my words and hear my voice through that. So it's that thing of just being very intentional and thoughtful about how do I make sure my life is invested in the life of these kids. And so much of that is, our culture says that so much of that is making sure that we have lots of money and lots of things. And so everybody needs to work and have a side hustle so you can make all deal this stuff. What our kids need is us. They don't
Mhm.
need more stuff. They don't need nicer
Yeah.
clothes. They don't need, they need some clothes, but they don't need
Right.
the best of everything. They need the best of us. And as we continue to show up and be intentional in their lives, all those other things, whether they show up or not, don't matter because they have the things that do.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's important too, that you just mentioned, and that intentionality is so important to be able to show up in whatever ways that look like, right? So I remember when my daughter is from my first marriage. I've been married twice, so my daughter's from my first marriage. She's my only biological child. Um, and I remember when me and her mom divorced and split up and living in different spaces. This was right back before Zoom and before all the cell phones and everything that they have
Right.
now. It actually was right when they first started having pictures on phones. So this is how far back this was, right? But I remember helping her with her math, right? Her calling me like that. I need help with her math,
Yeah.
and she would take a picture of the problem and send it to me, and then call me back, and then we would work through the the problems on the phone,
Yeah.
and just things like that. And then later on, when Facebook came, and then messaging where we could actually see each other when we weren't around each other, all of those things came into play later on. Um, and of course, now you got FaceTime and all of this stuff.
Right.
But all of that stuff then, when my daughter was little, all that stuff didn't exist. But I still had to find ways to show up. I still had to find
Yep.
ways to be there. And then another thing, what you said is just with our schedules, we're not always able to show up, right? So recently, I think it was just last month. Yeah, just Yeah, just last month, I just had my second annual Daddy Daughter Dance, right?
Nice.
So with the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, we actually sponsor that Daddy Daughter Dance, and so the reason why it was important for me to start doing a Daddy Daughter Dance was when my daughter was 7 or 8. Um, she had her first Daddy Daughter Dance, and I had to work. And I was like, all right, I think I'm gonna miss this one, but I'll catch the next one. My daughter's 23 now. There never was a next one,
Oh,
and so
wow.
even all the years, it's been other things that I've been through, other, dinners and things of that nature that she's had that I've been a part of. But that was the one thing that always stuck with me. It's like I missed that daddy daughter dance,
Yeah.
right? And so when I started the daddy daughter dance last year, I did the first one. It's for dads and daughters of all ages, right? So not just little girls. So we had some adult daughters that came with their fathers that
That's
their
cool.
father brought. Then you had some that went and got their fathers and they brought their fathers to the daddy daughter dance. And so this year was our second year of doing it, and that was because I I didn't want to say I didn't have the time, but I didn't take that moment,
Yeah.
at that time,
Yeah.
uh, to go with my daughter to her daddy daughter dance. And so, that was my way of making up for it, to create this opportunity for other fathers. And then that's what I tell them even then, before then, but even then, it's like, make sure you're taking out the time when you can. I know we can't always be there,
Right.
but when we can, let's try our best to show up. And in those ways, like my daughter, we've had this conversation, plenty of times. Of course, she's 23 now, and she's like, it didn't bother her then. It doesn't bother her now. But it was just something that always bothered me as a dad,
Sure.
like that I didn't take that moment, And so I'd like to, going back to what you said about being intentional, intentional with our time, intentional with how we show up, intentional with the things that we do. I think is all important, when we talk about fatherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, John, man, I said John. I don't even know if that's your name.
I've been
Jay.
called worse.
So, Jay, I'm definitely grateful for having you on, man. And tell well, before we go, I want you to have the last word. But before we go, I want you to leave us with a word of advice, a word of inspiration, for our fathers or father figures that we have. But before we get there, tell us a little bit more about the book, where we can find it,
Sure.
and things of that nature.
So yeah, the book's called God Help Me, I'm a Young Dad, 10 Essentials for Becoming the Dad Your Kids Need. It's available on Amazon. You can go out there and find it. It is 10 just big ideas. We've talked about love and service. We talked about being thankful. There's lots of others that are there. It's designed to be very practical, but it comes from a faith perspective. This is what this stuff means in a faith world. Give some very practical things for dads to do in their lives to build those things, but then also every chapter ends with, here are some things you can do around the dinner table or talk about or work on with your kids at any age to help them begin to build those things, these ideas into their lives as well. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun watching just dads kind of react to it and hopefully be encouraged by it. And I will say just very quickly, I don't want this to be a long commercial, but if you're interested, we have some churches that have given it away for Father's Day. We have men's groups that are using it for Bible studies with young dads, things like that. I'm always happy to work with folks to do kind of bulk rates and get it to you cheaper than Amazon can do it. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say that, but there we are. But you can connect with me and find out more about that. My website is jhallwriter, WRITER.com. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes there. Hit me up there. We can talk about getting books to your youth group, men's group, wherever you want to do that. Yeah. So that's the book.
I love it. I love it. So, Jay, I want you to leave us with a word of advice, a word of inspiration, motivation, however you feel, before we get out of here, and also with your social media handles and things of that nature, where we
Yeah.
can find you and work with you. I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that. To my audience, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I'll be right back. We're going to give you a word from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back. Hey guys, this podcast is sponsored by the Deal to Heal School for Living. That is our online community on the school platform. You guys can go there and check it out absolutely free for the first 7 days. And while you're there, take advantage of all the free resources that we have. And if you decide to stay, it's only $27 a month. And each month you have access to a new workshop. So go check that out at the Deal to Heal School for Living on the school platform. Just scan the QR code in the corner and you guys will be able to get there. All right. We'll see you soon. All right. Again, thank you to my listeners. Thank you, Jay, for coming and sharing your story, sharing your expertise.
My pleasure.
I want you to have the last word, so the floor is yours.
Well, thanks again, everybody, for letting me come and just talk for a little bit. I think if I gave one piece of encouragement or advice to young dads, and honestly to anybody, it is to run the race that's set in front of you. You are not the person you see on social media. You're not the guy next door. You have a particular way that you are. God made you. It's not an accident. And so the gifts that you have, the ways that you think, the way that you view the world is uniquely yours so that you can go and do the thing that you've been meant to do. So don't let that punk of comparison get you deciding that you need to go in a different direction. Go chase the thing that God has for you to chase and be who you are. And he mentioned social media, so I'll do that really quick. If you want to connect with me, at Okie Bookcast on all social media. That's my podcast, OKIE Bookcast. You can find me there, and I love talking about books and fatherhood and pop culture and whatever other nonsense comes up. So go run your race, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. We can't end it no better than that. To my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Until next time, you guys be blessed. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Tees. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealtees.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.